Namaskar and welcome back. I'd like to start by wishing you all a very happy new year. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday, and I wish you all a rewarding and blissful year ahead. Today, I'm going to talk about what is it that we can focus on that produces the best results in our meditation. I think in management, they have something called the 80-20 rule, that 20% of what you do is what brings 80% of the results. And I think on our spiritual journey, a lot of what we're trying to discover is what is that 20% of work that we can do spiritually, in terms of meditation, in terms of the way we live our lives, that will give us the most result. And there's a lot of experimentation and learning that takes place around that as we gradually tighten our focus and find what are the things that I can focus on that give me the most result and keep that focus there. So the discourse I'm going to share with you from our master, Sri Sri Anandamurti, is called Devotion and Salvation, and it's taken from the series Subhasita Sam'graha, part 19, Salvation and Devotion. And I've just taken out a part of it. I've taken out those bits which are really focusing on what is devotion and how can we understand that and apply it in our meditation and in our daily life. So, and I recommend that you go and read the full actual discourse. It would just take too long to do it now. So I've given it the title that the essence of devotion is service. So just keep that in mind as we read. To learn is the sadhana, the spiritual practice of knowledge. To learn is the sadhana of knowledge. To walk on the path, that is, to do regular practices, is the sadhana of action. Last but not least is devotion, bhakti, the culminating point of the sadhana, which leads to salvation. So the type of sadhana which leads to salvation, the culminating point of that sadhana is bhakti. What is bhakti? The inner feeling that whatever I do, I will do in order to give bliss to Paramatma, to the Supreme Consciousness, is devotion. What is knowledge? Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Satyam is absolute knowledge, and absolute knowledge is Brahma. Brahma means God. Paramatma, the Supreme Consciousness, is the embodiment of knowledge. Every particle of the universe is the manifestation of Paramatma. This is the essence of knowledge. What is the sadhana of knowledge? When one starts realizing that every mundane objectivity is the manifestation of Paramatma, one comes from the sphere of theory to practice. The realization that the universe is the manifestation of Paramatma is siddhi, or perfect achievement, in knowledge-based sadhana. Sadhana, spiritual practice. So knowledge-based spiritual practice. Constantly reminding oneself, Turiya cut out that bit constantly. That's just my notes. What does the term karma sadhana, that is, the sadhana of action, what does the term karma sadhana mean? What is the siddhi, that is, the perfect achievement of karma sadhana? Karma brahmeti karma vahukurvita. To serve every mundane object, thinking it to be the manifestation of Paramatma, is karma. To serve every mundane object, thinking it to be the manifestation of Paramatma, is karma. That is the science of action, or the sadhana of action. What is the achievement, siddhi, of karma sadhana? It is generally found that an average person spends more than 12 or 14 hours in thinking about his or her own self. But the moment one starts thinking about the universe, one becomes a karma sadhaka. When one starts spending all one's time in thinking for the universe, taking oneself to be a bubble in the ocean of karma, one gets siddhi, or perfect achievement, in karma sadhana. A person is a part of the universe, and when one starts serving the universe, one is also automatically included among the served. Whatever is done only to please Paramatma, the Supreme Consciousness, this is called devotion. One has to serve the universe with this ideation. In the beginning, due to samskara, that is one's past karma, there is a feeling of doership. But when gradually the accumulated samskaras, past karma, start being exhausted, one starts questioning the source of one's energies and capacities. Are they really one's own possessions or creations? Even the strongest of wrestlers becomes frail and is unable to speak if he or she does not eat for a couple of days. The scholarship of a scholar vanishes in the thin air if you keep him or her without food for a week. Meaning thereby, all your knowledge, intellect, capacity, and valor means courage, are dependent on him. That is why there is nothing for a human being to be proud of. The moment one understands this, one is established in devotion. And then alone will one be able to realize that one is working according to the wish of the Supreme Consciousness with all one's capacities. This is the sign and feeling of a staunch devotee. The ideation that whatever I do only to please the Supreme Consciousness is called devotion. Bhaktir Bhagavato Seva. It means devotion is service to God. When devotees serve the universe, they do it with the feeling that they are serving the manifestation of the Supreme Consciousness only to please Him. Devotees always think that everything, whatever belongings they have, belong to the Supreme Consciousness, and they are utilizing them only to please Him. They will serve Him with the intellect and stamina given to them by their beloved. When these things will be snatched away, they will serve the Lord with whatever will remain. When nothing remains, they will come to the Lord and ask for further work. This is called devotion. Devotees render services to the people because they know in the heart of their hearts that the universe is the manifestation of the Supreme Consciousness. Every mundane creature is the child of the Supreme Consciousness. If one will do service to the people, it will be identical to pleasing the Supreme Consciousness. I'll say that sentence again. If one will do service to the people, it will be identical to pleasing the Supreme Consciousness. A devotee performs spiritual practices only because the Supreme Consciousness wants this. Thus, a devotee performs spiritual practice only to please the Supreme Consciousness. Such persons are called Gopa. Gopayate jasa Gopa. That is, one who gives bliss to the Supreme Consciousness is Gopa. So let's go back a little and look at some of these points, because it really is focusing on that 20% or even that. What is the most important thing that we can do in meditation and in going about our daily lives that will move us forward along the path of spiritual progress? Or, to put it in the terms of what is being advised us here, what can we do that will, please the Supreme Consciousness the most? So it says very clearly what is knowledge and how do we develop that. It says what is the essence of knowledge, what is the essence of action, and what is the essence of devotion. That's what's here. To learn is the sadhana of knowledge, the spiritual practice. To walk on the path, that is, to take that knowledge that you've learned and to put it into action, right? I've learned something and now I apply it. So learning that important thing, what is it I should know that's most important? That is the sadhana of knowledge. And what is it that I should do that is most important? That is the sadhana of action, right? So taking what I learned, putting it into practice. And last but not least is devotion, bhakti. And this, there are many different practices, but bhakti, the practice of bhakti or devotion, is the sadhana that leads to salvation. What is bhakti? The inner feeling that whatever I do, I will do in order to give bliss to the Supreme Consciousness is devotion. So, if we want to acquire that devotion, then this is what we're aiming at. To have the feeling that whatever I do, I will do in order to please or to give bliss to the Supreme Consciousness. When you can live your life like that whatever you do to please the Supreme Consciousness, then that is bhakti sadhana. Then it talks about what is the essence of knowledge, right? So we are learning and we are learning many things, but what is it that is the essence of what we need to learn? And here it is. Every particle of the universe is the manifestation of Paramatma, of the Supreme Consciousness. This is the essence of knowledge. So that's the truth that we need to focus on, that every particle of the universe is the manifestation of Brahma. And here I like this use of the word particle, because it's the smallest. So you and I are made of particles. Objects are made of particles. or wavelengths, right? If I think everything in the universe is the supreme consciousness, then somehow things have boundaries, right? I'm a thing, you're a thing, other things. So it's a bunch of different objects. So division, that sense of division is there. Separateness. When you think of, if you say everything, then you're looking at all the things. And you're missing the fact that the space in between things is also particles, is also wavelengths, right? So if you want to get that feeling of oneness, of there is only God, nothing else, don't think, rather than think all things are God, which still keeps this sense of one thing divided from another, put that aside and try thinking every particle, every wavelength, right? And that includes you, your brain, your thoughts are wavelengths and particles. So there's no divisions. It's just an ocean of oneness, an ocean of particles. Try thinking like that, and you'll find it's easier to overcome this sense of separation. So this is the essence of knowledge. And the sadhana, or the spiritual practice of knowledge, when one starts realizing that every mundane object is the manifestation of the supreme consciousness, one comes from the sphere of theory to practice. So this is important, how to come from theory into practice. And that is to focus, constantly repeating it to oneself, that every particle of my body, mind, and spirit, and the entire universe is the supreme consciousness, right? Keep that constantly in your mind. That's practice. It's not just, oh, that's a nice idea, and then going on in our usual, kind of mundane consciousness without practicing the idea. The realization that the universe is the manifestation of Paramatma is siddhi, or perfect achievement, in knowledge-based sadhana. So when that feeling, that realization that every particle of my existence, every particle of my thoughts, of my body, of the universe, everything is the supreme consciousness, when that becomes your normal state of awareness, then you have achieved perfection in the practice of knowledge sadhana. Then it moves on to karma sadhana, the sadhana of action. So what's the essence of that? To serve every mundane object, thinking it to be the manifestation of the supreme consciousness, is karma, action. That is the sadhana of action. What is achievement or perfection of karma sadhana? It is generally found that an average person spends more than 12 or 14 hours in thinking about his or her own self. But the moment one starts thinking about the universe, thinking for the universe, one becomes a karma sadhaka. When one starts spending all one's time in thinking for the universe, then you get siddhi in karma sadhana. So the sadhana of knowledge and the realization is that everything is the supreme consciousness. Then putting that into action-based sadhana, karma sadhana. Okay, when I start serving the entire universe with that feeling that every atom of the universe which I am serving is the supreme consciousness, then that is karma sadhana. So realizing that everything is the supreme consciousness, that is knowledge sadhana, and serving the creation with that realization that everything is the supreme consciousness, that is karma sadhana. So whatever is done only to please the Supreme Consciousness. Now we come to devotion. What's the essence of that? And here, this service spirit, whatever is done only to please the Supreme Consciousness, this is devotion. How do we realize that, or what brings about this realization? When you realize all your knowledge, intellect, capacity, and courage are dependent on Him, means that it's not actually yours, it's a gift to you, your knowledge, and just take away your food for a couple of days and all your knowledge will vanish, right? All your strength, all your so it's not yours. We depend upon what we receive from the universe, which is the form of the Supreme Consciousness, right? So the Supreme Consciousness is giving us what we need to operate. Take that away and all of what we think is ours is gone. That the moment one understands this, one becomes established in devotion. So here's a clue about how to get established in devotion. Where does my knowledge come from? Where does my power come from? Where does my courage come from? Where do my abilities, are they really my own, right? Or is it all just grace, right? If you can work on that question and really realize it, then it says, the moment you understand this, you become established in devotion. In another discourse, another video, I was saying that this idea of being witnessed helps establish that feeling of, I am not the doer. The Supreme Consciousness is doing everything. So cultivating that feeling that He is seeing and validating. I exist only because He is witnessing me, right? If you work on that, that takes away this feeling of ego, and the feeling of devotion naturally arises. So again, it says multiple times, the ideation that whatever I do only to please the Supreme Consciousness is called devotion. And it quotes this shloka, Bhaktir Bhagavato Seva. Devotion is service to the divine. Devotees always think that everything, whatever belongings they have, meaning physical belongings, meaning their body, their brain, their courage, etc., they belong to the Supreme Consciousness. And they will utilize, because it belongs to the Supreme Consciousness. So everything I have belongs to the Supreme Consciousness, even my body and my mind. And I will use what has been given to me to please the Supreme Consciousness. And how do I do that? By serving the children of the Supreme Consciousness. In another example, he says that if you want to please a mother, serve her children, right? And it's the same. If you want to please the Supreme Consciousness, there's nothing much that you can do to please Him except serving the creation, which is actually serving the Supreme Consciousness. Once you understand that, right, that everything is the Supreme Consciousness. Devotees render services to the people because they know in the heart of their hearts that the universe is the manifestation of the Supreme Consciousness. Right? So work on that idea, right? I serve people. When I serve people, I'm serving the Supreme Consciousness until it becomes so deep that you know it all the time in the heart of your hearts. Every mundane creature is the child of the Supreme Consciousness. If one will do service to the people, it will be identical to pleasing Paramat, the Supreme Consciousness. And lastly, it says, A devotee performs sadhana, meditation, spiritual practice, only because the Supreme Consciousness wants this. Right? Why should I do meditation? So it was interesting, the part that said that most people spend 12 to 13 hours thinking only about themselves and doing meditation to please themselves, really. But what we're aiming at then is to do meditation to please the Supreme Consciousness. And the funny thing is that if you really do meditation with that spirit to please the Supreme Consciousness, that will be the thing that has the biggest impact on your meditation. And in the end, that will obliterate or eliminate your stress, your anxiety, and give you what you really are looking for. So when you give up doing it for yourself, paradoxically, that's when you get the best result. So do our meditation, what we are working towards is doing our meditation only to please the Supreme Consciousness. Such people who do their spiritual practice in that way are called Gopa. One who gives bliss to the Supreme Consciousness is Gopa. So, a very powerful discourse. It tells us what is the essence of knowledge, and that is the realization that every particle, every atom of mind, body, spirit in the universe, it's all the same thing. It's all the Supreme Consciousness. It gives us the essence of karma yoga, right? Karma sadhana. And that is to serve the universe with the ideation that you got in your sadhana of knowledge, serving the universe with the ideation that every particle that I am serving, every object that I'm serving is the Supreme Consciousness. And it gives us the essence of bhakti sadhana, and that is that everything I do only to please the Supreme Consciousness. So this is the 20% of the 80-20 rule in the spiritual journey. Focus on these things, develop this realization, this understanding, and these are the understandings and ideations and way of living that will give you the most result for all your work. Thank you for joining me. Have a blissful and wonderful week, and see you again next time. Namaskar.